There's a bit of a civil war brewing in the wokist camp. And this is of course great and glorious news for our side, because if the wokists can do half the damage to themselves as the feminists did, then our worst enemies may yet become our greatest allies. But before we get to the currently brewing wokist civil war, let's have a little bit of a step back and a refresher as to how the feminist one came about, because a lot of the same noxious bubbles are reappearing now. It began with the divide between the TERFs, the trans-exclusionary radical feminists, and the intersectionalists, where they began attacking one another with their own weapons. TERFs, violence and the vilification of self-defense. It's happening more and more that TERFs are directly attacking transgender people, notably transgender women. Written in that classic style of a 2017-2016 odd feminist article, where everything is overblown to a ridiculous extent. They are being attacked, prosecuted, killed in the streets, I say, when what we're really talking about here is words on the internet. More often than not, words in private chat groups even. There's a fantastic little lefty meme down here with the usual mucho texto, ending with the point, "This is so nice, I love meeting another radical feminist." Radical feminist? Are you kidding? I'm a conservative Christian! Such an easy mistake to make, eh? And on the other side of the divide, you have the feminists saying TERF isn't just a slur, it's hate speech. Literally, all of the weapons they were wielding against, well, everyone else, were being applied against one another. And it cut massive portions out of the feminist movement, even of course going so far as to vilifying and bestranging J.K. Rowling. Stranging, excuse me. Now, in and of itself, this was nothing particularly new at the time, and we didn't even recognize truly what was happening, because leftists eating leftists was hardly anything new. But what this really was a question of doctrine and of purity, and whether or not some people believed that the feminist movement were just for, well, women, and others believed for a far more grander scope. And it was the grander visionaries that won out in the end. Think about this. When was the last time that you saw feminism being the main point in anything? When women's right was the thing being pushed, when it was a women's only topic, like sexism or misogyny by itself. It's been a while, hasn't it? These days they do appear because they are still, of course, powerful tools and weapons in the intersectional toolbox, but they are always seen alongside the other parts of the agenda. Racism, transgenderism, homophobia, although that one's getting awfully rare as well, as gay men have more or less been ousted from the movement as well. Another wonderful example of this that we're starting to see now, because this began with the targeting of certain individuals and the ousting of them from the community, thereby creating the TERFs. Nostalgia critic, or Lindsay Ellis as she calls herself these days, desperately trying to put as much distance from herself and the channel Awesome Days as humanly possible, is one of the lefty content creators that has quite clearly expressed a fear of their own fan base. And I remember I went to some kind of silly YouTuber con thing over in London with Sargon years and years and years ago, and there were entire panels where the hosts were talking about how they were feeling afraid of their own community. How every time they uploaded a video, they were scared stiff that they would be attacked by their own comment sections, which deeply confused me because, hell, even my most unpopular videos, I know why. I've never been afraid of my community, and I'm certainly not afraid of the whinging crybabies that occasionally attempt to ratio me either. But it becomes far more clear when you look at, again, the current day wokist agenda. During a preview of Forspoken, devs described their black protagonist in cringe-inducing ways. This is a archive link for a Kotaku article that does the usual Kotaku things. They talk about how they were so excited to talk about the character's race first and foremost, and maybe further down the line at some point some gameplay might be discussed if they were feeling particularly generous. Whilst Forspoken didn't appear to be inventing the wheel when it came to its magic open world, the leading actress Ella Balinska still stood out to me as a rabid racial ideologue, of course. This entire article is about like one throwaway mention describing the female black character's walk as a bit of a hip-hoppy walk. That created this enormous monstrosity. It created, like, a massive thing. This was repeated in all the usual woke site because of a ridiculous throwaway mention. It seems insane, yet you gotta remember, again, this is literally what they do. It is the purity spiral, inevitably going upwards and upwards and downwards and downwards and around and around and a bend, because it turns out absolute purity is damnably difficult to achieve. There's always something to be critiqued, even when they are getting everything they want. Even when you have a strong, black, female protagonist played by a woman with minority background, with all of the usual nonsense like finger painting, representing power, yada yada yada, even when the developers themselves are licking the assholes of the wokeist crowd, tonguing it as deeply and lasciviously as they can, there will always be one little problem here and there. There will always be something wrong. There will always be something to attack, because that is, of course, the entire point of the movement. Intersectionality is based on the very fundamental idea that everything must be broken down further and further and further to try and find some sort of an advantage to wiggle one's way further into power and influence, since that is always the overriding goal rather than any of their demands. Diversity, inclusion, representation, all of these are tricks. They are ways to get into positions of power and influence, and once they're there, well, again, like demonstrated with Lindsay Ellis, they become petrified. Because they're aware that they're tricks. They're entirely aware what the point of these buzzwords are, and they know that no matter how closely they follow the narrative, no matter how many software updates they download into their little NPC brains, there will always be some angle, some incredibly uncharitable interpretation that can be had. Always some way to tear one down. And there was a very interesting little Tumblr post here, the home of many a handbeast, that I found over on Kotaku in Action, a very good subreddit, by the way, that you should check out. I shan't read to you this whole thing, because it is rather lengthy again, but the basic point is that this person, who is a wokeist, absolutely, has identified a bit of a problem. There is also a large grey area between an offensive stereotype and thing that can be misconstrued as a stereotype if one uses a particularly reductive lens of interpretation that the text itself is not endorsing. That is the point that I just made, isn't it? There is always some way to look at a thing and go, that's sexist, or that's racist, or that's stereotypical, or that's phobic, or blah 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 blah. There's always some way. Again, in the famous words of Anita Sarkeesian, everything is problematic. And this person is now mentioning that occasionally you've got stories based around certain things. Japanese-American Beth Harmon would be pigeonholed as another nerdy Asian stock character. Baby Driver, great movie by the way, check it out, with a black lead would be accused of perpetuating stereotypes about black youth and crime. Phantom of the Opera, with a female phantom, would be accused of playing into predatory lesbian stereotypes. And these are all the things that the wokeists themselves are saying about everything. Now, if a Phantom of the Opera with a female phantom was announced, I would call that woke garbage, and the wokists, ironically, would call it regressive garbage, again, because their entire structure is built around that. And finally, this person is so close to reaching enlightenment and going, what's actually the problem here? Is the problem that there isn't enough representation or diversity, or is it the unfathomably toxic mindset of reducing everything down to the most negative interpretation imaginable? Now, of course, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't force them to drink, as she does double back by going that that's not to say we can't ever question the larger patterns and stories about certain demographics, or not draw lines between artistic liberty and social responsibility, because that's the important thing here. And again, that's the crux, isn't it? Social responsibility. A stupid show about a stupid guy driving a stupid car really fast and in an incredibly impressive manner, like in Baby Driver, does not have a social responsibility. It's a stupid show about stupid cars. It's like Fast and Furious. Oh, what is the social responsibility of Fast and Furious? None. Absolutely goddamn nothing. It's fine to have a point or even a moral in your story. In fact, in many cases, it is absolutely preferable. But it is not a social responsibility. Hell, in some cases I almost wish it was, but as with all things, responsibilities are personal. It's something you must take on yourself, otherwise it's gonna be hollow and worthless, isn't it? And interestingly enough, this got quite a bit of a response, once again because it is directly attacking this point of view. The reductivist digging to just find something tiny, anything, whatever to criticize and attack. Now, as of yet, this little civil war is merely just bubbling. There are just the fumes on the surface, the fire hasn't begun to spread yet, and hey, we're not even entirely sure we're smelling smoke just yet, but I do believe it is essentially inevitable. It is going to happen, because sooner or later, even the most rabid wokist is gonna look at the television and go, I just want to enjoy this, goddammit. And they're gonna be chided by their friends saying, oh no, 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 because that character you like is X, Y, and Z stereotype. We'll have to wait and see, but I've got a good feeling about this. I really do. Until next time, I have been Arch. Thank you all very much for watching, and if you liked the video, as always, please do consider leaving a comment, an upvote, and what else? Is there any point in anything else? I mean, I could ask you to subscribe, but YouTube would just unsub you anyway, so yeah, just do the two other ones. Because, again, not like you have much of a choice with the downvote button having disappeared anyway, so click the only buttons you're allowed, bigot. And until next time, have a good day.